Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Mike Brown, Dean of the George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's event. It's a particular pleasure to welcome our many guests to the campus of the George Washington University. On behalf of the faculty and students of GW, I would like to extend an especially warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, Her Excellency Dr. Longying Tai, the Republic of China's First Minister of Culture. It is a privilege to host such a senior government official who is also a renowned author and an esteemed public intellectual. Madam Minister, welcome to GW. This important event is co-sponsored by GW and the Brookings Institution. Here at GW, this event is being hosted by the Elliott School's Seeger Center for Asian Studies and its Taiwan Education and Research Program. The Elliott School has a long tradition of academic excellence in Asian studies with strong teaching, research, and policy programs focused on Taiwan. The Taiwan Education and Research Program was established in 2004, and it has organized an impressive array of seminars, lectures, conferences, and other special events over the years. Along with the Gelman Library's Taiwan Resource Center, the only one of its kind in the United States, GW has become a leading hub of academic work on Taiwan. We hope and expect that this will continue for many years to come. I would like to thank my GW colleague, Professor Ed McCord, for his dedicated leadership of both the Taiwan Education and Research Program and the Seeger Center for Asian Studies. GW is pleased and proud to co-sponsor today's event with Brookings and its Center for Northeast Asian Policy Studies. To introduce our distinguished speaker, it is my pleasure to turn the podium over to my distinguished colleague, Dr. Richard Bush, one of the world's leading experts on Asia and the director of the Center for Northeast Asian Policy Studies at the Brookings Institution.
Thank you, Dean Brown, for those words of welcome and kind words about me. As Dean Brown has said, I'm from the Brookings Institution. It is our great pleasure to sponsor today's event in collaboration with the Seeger Center of the Elliott School here at GW. It's also my privilege to introduce our speaker. Dr. Longying Tai is an accomplished scholar, writer, and public intellectual. She has taught at universities in Taiwan, Hong Kong, the United States, and Germany. She's the author of 17 books on a variety of subjects, all of which are highly admired by her readers. Dr. Long founded a cultural foundation that bears her name, and in fine Confucian tradition, she has twice accepted official positions in the R.O.C. government. From September 1999 to March 2003, she was Director of Cultural Affairs in the Taipei Municipal Government under the leadership of Mayor Ma Ying-jeou. In May of this year, she accepted President Ma Ying-jeou's appointment as the R.O.C.'s first Minister of Culture. The title of Minister Long's talk today is Soft Power in Hard Times, a Cultural Perspective on Cross-Strait Relations. I think this is a subject that calls to mind one of my favorite anecdotes about China-Taiwan relations in this year, 2002. It concerns a man named Han Han, a young mainland Chinese writer, blogger, and rally driver who visited Taiwan in the spring. While there, he was struck by the vibrancy of Taiwan's democracy and by the kindness and sincerity of the people. After his return home, he wrote, among other things, "I need to thank Taiwan for protecting Chinese culture. It has preserved the virtues of the Chinese people, preventing many deep-rooted qualities from being destroyed." Han Han's insight, I think, should alert us to the important cultural asset that Taiwan has in its complex relations with mainland China. They also demonstrate the timely significance of today's event. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Longying Tai, Minister of Culture of the Republic of China.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This invitation, a very kind invitation from George Washington University, actually came to me 2 years ago. When I first received the letter, I wrote back, I said, I would love to come, but please select the time when the cherry blossoms are blooming, then I would come. So there's a lag of time, but finally I'm here. Not anymore as a writer, but as a civil servant am I standing here today. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to be here. Usually I do not read my text, but for some strange reason, this time I have a belated jet lag, so I feel that my head is walking in clouds. So today I'm going to rely more on the text that I've prepared. In recent years, Confucius has become the standard bearer of China's projection of soft power. And I would like to share with you my PowerPoint today. How am I going to work on this? Let me see. Where do I point? Oops. Okay, good. So there's Confucius. And I have also been so often asked by my Western colleagues and journalists asking me, well, is Taiwan Academy going to compete with Confucius Institute? So I thought, well, okay, I might as well start with Confucius today. Beginning actually with the 3rd grade, when the Taiwanese barely could read and write, we learned the analects, 论语. The teachings of Confucius permeated our lives both in physical and in spiritual spaces. Every morning we paid homage to the statue of Confucius before we enter our classroom. How many of you grew up in Taiwan or educated in Taiwan? Can you raise your hand? Okay, then you'll find this picture very, very familiar. This is the Taiwanese version of Confucius, a very modest statue standing in the corner of a primary school campus. And inside the classroom, there must be 4 characters hanging on the back, looking down at us, which are the 4 principles of behavior from Confucius. And you, as Taiwanese, you know what those 4 letters are. Recognize them? 礼义廉耻. So that's probably the core values that the Taiwanese society are using to teach their children. The words from the analects are part and parcel of the daily language. When we meet friends, for example, even today, we will quote the old master saying, wow, having friends coming from afar, isn't that a real pleasure? That's very funny. It's just a matter of saying hi, and you quote Confucius. Isn't that overdoing it? And then when a schoolboy tries to insult a girl in the classroom, you know what he would say to the girl? He would quote Confucius by saying, well, only women and uneducated people are most difficult to deal with. When you are familiar with them, they become cheeky, and when you ignore them, they resent it. What is the Chinese text of that? 唯女子与小人为难养也, you know. So you quote Confucius. Well, the Germans quote Goethe. Well, we quote even more. Then amongst hundreds and hundreds of idioms and expressions that become embedded in the daily usage, there's one phrase which I think stands out as the ultimate measure of a person's moral character. That phrase composes of 5 characters denoting the 5 traits of Confucius himself. Can you guess which 5 characters I'm going to use to show you? There you go. See, we know. Okay, indeed. To judge morals, you have to be kind, upright, courteous, temperate, and magnanimous. So 温良恭俭让. These are the ones, and that comes from the Analects. Okay. Thus, you may understand how surprised I was when I first came across the same 5 characters in the Chinese mainland context, to be precise, in Chairman Mao's text, which says, oh, that's what the kids are still doing nowadays, is the 5 characters, only one is missing. To quote from Mao, he said, "Revolution is not a dinner party, or writing an essay, or painting a picture, or doing embroidery. One cannot be so refined, so leisurely gentle," and there it comes, "so kind, upright, courteous, temperate, and magnanimous. Revolution is violence. It is a violent act of one class overturning the other. It is necessary that every single village must go through a short period of terror." So that was the first time I came across the same 5 characters, but in a completely different text. The text of 1927 from Mao turned my values upside down, which says, violence is not to be abhorred, and kindness and magnanimity is not to be emulated. For the first time, I realized that, wow, values could be completely reversed, that ends could justify means, and then I realized that language is a candid, sometimes brutal revelation of culture. And I began my tour of looking at slogans. Wherever I go, I study those slogans. I look at them carefully. So on a lighter note, I would like to show you some of the slogans from Taiwan and China. And slogans are telltale signs of the submerged collective psyche. There you go. We grew up, as children of Taiwan, we grew up with slogans like this. Everywhere. I could still recite it today, and I tried to translate it into English. It probably doesn't make sense to you, which is English translation, but actually nor does it make sense to me in Chinese, especially when I was 3rd grade. Okay, this is the type of slogan that surrounds you, that you breathe in and out with this kind of atmosphere, the moral atmosphere. The purpose of life is to enhance the life of all mankind. And you teach that to a 10-year-old in Taiwan. Our compatriots, I once compared notes with the Chinese intellectual my age. He was born in Beijing of the same year, 1952. So we had the chance to spend a couple of days together in Switzerland. And so there was one game we played. That was early times in the early 90s when, well, I met my first authentic Chinese only in 1979. And so there was this time in the early 90s, I was together with this Chinese writer, and we sat down together, we played a game. That is, we put 2 pieces of paper, and we were born the same year of the dragon, 1952, so we wrote down, 1952, where were you? And 1962, where were you, what you were doing? 1965, where were you and what you were doing? So we compare our biographical notes. And so when we were being taught that the purpose of life is to enhance the life of mankind, he was receiving this kind of education in early days. And I don't know, well, this you see everywhere promoting that you're allowed to only, the one baby policy. And the language itself, you see how it differs from the language that's being permeated in Taiwan. This one literally translated, it says the upper line, it says, the upper row says, can someone translate that into English for me? Would somebody just stand up and translate it for me, literally? Come on, somebody be bold enough and do the translation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then second row. Okay. We would rather bleed like a river, yes, than having an extra baby. So it's better to bleed all out than having an extra baby. So speaking of brutality of language. And here's another one, which comes later time. I mean, this is mind-boggling. Can someone translate this? This is mind-boggling. Would someone translate this? If you intend to rob, and this is a slogan from the police department. If you intend to rob, it's better that you invest in the stock market or real estate, meaning that there are better things to do than robbing, you know. And I found this one also from the police department. Jianzhong, you can't see that. I'm sorry. Oh, over there, you can see it over there. All right. This one says, if you have to rape someone, then you better consider going to a prostitute. It's better for the society. So it's moral teaching, you know. And then this one is funny too. I don't know why. There's even an English translation right down there. So one should not drop down. You should not drop down your noble head, except when you pick money up. Okay. Good. Of course, I'm exaggerating it, but what I'm trying to say is that these slogans actually carry a whole mindset behind it. But by comparison, I would say that there are probably no place in the world which are more quote-unquote Confucius than Taiwan. You don't find street names in Taiwan like Liberation Boulevard or People's Avenue. What you find all over the place in Taiwan are street names such as what? Loyalty, Filial Piety Street. When you translate in English, it sounds very funny. You know? 忠孝东路 is Loyalty, Filial Piety Street, or you have Benevolence, Love Street, and you have Trust, Integrity Street. These are typical street names in Taipei, and Ethic, Cultivation Boulevard, and Ultimate Good Street. So these are the type of street names that the Taiwanese name their cities. Then even renting a wedding hall can be a problem. On the net, we found this picture. It's this desperate couple who is going to get married. They rented a hall, but they want to try to make it very romantic. However, there is no way they could cover up those slogans on the poles, and you can read those slogans on the wall, on the pole. They couldn't hide it because it kills the romance. It says 养天地正气，法古今完人. It means a full man is cultivated by the universal virtue of righteousness. It doesn't really fit a wedding, but it's there because it's everywhere. Now, but Confucianism is not the only pillar, so to speak, of Taiwan. Another pillar of the infrastructure in Taiwan is, of course, democracy, and with it, the rule of law. In other words, Taiwan is the place, I think, where the traditional philosophy of Confucius from 2,005 years back magically gets connected with the modern concept of liberal democracy. The idea of a civilized society of Confucius combined with the civil society influenced by the West, which I would include the elements of modernity brought in by the Japanese. These two combined makes up what Taiwan is today. The best example to illustrate this merge is this plaque at the entrance of the Taipei City Hall. Okay. Those of you who can read Chinese will recognize it. It is interesting to notice that almost everything that's proclaimed in this plaque is being practiced today, well, with faults and mistakes, of course. So what does this plaque say at the entrance to the City Hall? It says this. It is the text from Confucius, a utopia in the Confucius political theory, the Commonwealth state. And I put down the major points of it. It says virtuous and worthy men are elected to public office, and capable men hold posts of gainful employment in society. And then if you read down further, the underprivileged are being taken care of, and men and women are being elected to public office as a matter of practice. And when this is being practiced today, you will not think that it's from Confucius, you would think it's from democracy. But actually they merge perfectly in this case. Of course, those men and women who have been elected in the public office may not be always virtuous and worthy. However, they are elected through due process. So in the sense that with this plaque, you can see that somehow the idealism expressed in Confucius philosophy comes to connect with the modern idea of democracy in a very interesting way. But of course, I'm by no means trying to say that Taiwan is a wonderful place or it's a perfect place. It definitely is not, far from it. But there is indeed something rather remarkable about Taiwan, which is worth the attention of the world communities. It is no accident that before Gao Xingjian was honored with the Nobel Prize in Literature, all his works were exclusively published in Taiwan, and because they were banned in his home country. It is no accident that the elite bookstore becomes a kind of a champion in fine taste and exports a kind of a lifestyle, Taiwanese lifestyle, to Hong Kong and to China. It is no accident that Malaysia produces large number of the best Chinese language novelists and poets who find Taiwan their incubator. And it is no accident that the Taiwanese filmmakers, songwriters, and authors enjoy a very prominent position in the Chinese-speaking world. It is no accident that the only solid working democracy of Greater China takes root in Taiwan. A democratic system with guaranteed freedom of expression has given rise to a creative and culturally vibrant society of Taiwan. So, having said this, I hope you don't come to the conclusion that I am superstitious about the system of democracy. Over the lunch table, I addressed this question to Richard and asked him, do you still have an unfailing faith in democracy? And Ambassador Julie Schneider said, wow, that really is a tough question. It is a tough question for me as well, and for the Taiwanese as well. So it's an ongoing process with trials and errors. Okay, now, what I'm trying to say is the creative life and the vibrant fabric of life, of cultural life in Taiwan has a lot to thank for, and democracy and the underpinning of traditional Chinese values embedded in Confucianism is what makes Taiwan is today. Coming to Confucius Institute, critics in the West look upon the Confucius Institute as a disguise for propaganda serving the interest of the state. I see that point, but whenever I hear that, I can't help thinking back on the time when the USIS was operating its worldwide network. I don't know if Americans know what USIS is? Yes. We, as post-war generation of Taiwanese, we grew up with USIS as well. and that was propaganda ministry. But that was, of course, USIS was also the propaganda ministry serving the interests of the US. Ironically, I was one among many Asian youths who were inspired and enlightened by the propaganda magazines and art exhibitions provided by the USIS. So that's a very ambivalent thing. But is there another angle to look at the Confucius Institute? I think yes. The Chinese mainland and Taiwan parted in 1949. Throughout the 6 decades after the Big Divide, the KMT cultivated a quote-unquote cultural conservatism in Taiwan, supported by Confucius thoughts, while their communist brothers and sisters on the mainland headed straight into a radicalized past, turning their backs on their own tradition. But radicalism is indeed a very risky business. When it goes wrong, you pay a heavy price. A renowned historian from Shanghai, in his retrospect on the May 4th movement of 1919, referring to the path of radicalism that China has chosen, he made the following remark, and I'll quote from him. He said, "Our soil of culture," of course this is a metaphor, "our soil of culture has been so overly plowed that it's been turned into desert-like alkaline soils. Under normal circumstances, it takes one generation's time and effort to make spiritual progress. With us, it's bound to take several generations, while history is shredded into broken pieces, incapable of forming a comprehensible line. We pedal hard without moving ahead. We work double shift but achieve only half," end quote. What I personally see in Confucius Institute, in addition to its soft propaganda side, of course, is an attempt to be reconnected with one's own root. It is, in fact, an extension of the Confucius fever back home. Chinese children are learning the analects and reciting Tang poetry. Business people are taking very expensive courses in Chinese classics, and professors are making profit by explaining the analects to the eager pilgrims. So the cultural soil, if I quote from that historian again, the cultural soil dried with alkaline is longing for the gentle and pure rain. After half a century of vilification, the values of being kind, upright, courageous, temperate, and magnanimous are again to be rediscovered, relearned, and re-embraced. So, is there a need for the Taiwan Academy to compete with the Confucius Institute? I hardly think so. China is China. It is so big, so ancient, so grand, so monumental, and so resilient that no one else fit the shoe. However, I think Taiwan does have a unique, although a very modest, position to offer some contribution to the global community. Namely, if it's been proven that a civil society can operate in total harmony with Confucianism, I am aware that I'm grossly simplifying Confucianism here. So if it's been proven through Taiwan that a civil society can operate in total harmony with Confucianism, if it's been seen that a relatively robust democracy can rise out of the aftermath of war and poverty, as Taiwan has experienced, then perhaps we dare to entertain the idea that China someday will become a civilized as well as a civil society, or a very respectable moral superpower. But serious challenges are here. How long can Taiwan enjoy this stability, the steady prosperity, and most important of all, their lifestyle underpinned by democracy? With the rise of China, we are already witnessing from Taiwan, we're already witnessing a kind of a brain drain or a talent drain through the lure of soft power from China. Many of our best playwrights, painters, movie directors, designers, gallery owners, writers, and cartoonists have moved their base to the mainland. So you might ask, but can money buy creativity? Maybe not, but artists need money to show their paintings. Directors definitely need money to make films, and cinema owners need capital to expand their market for the theater goers, for the cinema goers. And the Chinese expansion of its soft power is a worldwide phenomenon. Just in May this year, when the Chinese conglomerate from Dalian bought the US-based AMC Entertainment Holdings, which is one of the world's largest cinema chains, Americans got very nervous and upset. And so did the French, when their chateaux and their Burgundy vineyards were sold to the Chinese. And there was one often quoted example, that's the remake of the hit film Red Dawn, which at first replaced the Soviet troops invading. The original of the film was that the Russians were invading the US. So the remake of Red Dawn, initially they changed the Soviets into the communist Chinese are invading the US. However, when the business consideration comes into play, the MGM, they decided to change the Chinese villains into North Koreans. So what we're thinking is, if these big countries such as the US are also so nervous about the Chinese takeover of the cultural industry, what would the Taiwanese say? What would the Taiwanese think? In the US, when you talk about things like this, it's only business takeover, while in Taiwan, a takeover can be interpreted as something very physical. So what lies in the future? I actually don't think we can go on with the mindset of the Red Dawn, pinning down China as a threat and a threat only. The Taiwanese in particular needs wisdom in dealing with the mainland. If Taiwan is a tiny motorboat, then China is the aircraft carrier. You will be extremely cautious. However, I think there are real people on the aircraft carrier, and to avoid any sort of collision, communication becomes essential, indispensable, and there is no communication without empathy. I would call, therefore, for the need of empathy from both sides of the strait. First of all, I think we Taiwanese must understand that China has gone through half a century of political upheavals and spiritual uprooting. The government has a lot of catch-up to do. The ordinary people are trying to reorient themselves in this new order, and the intellectuals are busy with soul-searching. And all in all, this is really a daunting historical task to undertake for any nation. We need to be patient for an aircraft carrier to turn around. Takes time, takes a lot of effort and takes a lot of well-wishing from people around them. At the same time, we would hope that China would understand what the Taiwanese really care about. The freedom to write what we think, to paint what we see, to sing what really moves us, to tolerate those who disagree with us, to protect those who are unjustly persecuted, to reject leaders whom we distrust, and to create whatever coming from our individual heart. The belief in this kind of freedom is the foundation on which the Taiwanese stand. So the real emphasis of the so-called soft power should be on the word soft, not on the word power. The softness in listening to the whimper of the weak, in seeing the tears of those who suffer in the dark, in hearing the suppressed cry of desperation and protest. Soft power is not to make power appear softer. Soft power means that the only way you can be really powerful is by being genuinely and honestly soft to people outside your territory and to people inside your territory. So when there is full confidence in the success, in softness of power, the softness power, then I would think Mr. Confucius probably needs not be placed near the king. He probably would enjoy just a very nice, cool corner in a primary school close to children, or he might not even mind standing right next to a Gardensberg like this. Thank you so very much. Thank you for giving me the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Leung, for a stimulating talk. We now have quite a bit of time for questions. The way we've arranged it is that there is a mic in the center aisle here. We ask you to line up and pose your question. When you do so, please identify yourself so Minister Leung knows who you are. And as you can tell, she's very intelligent, so you don't need to make your question very long. Keep it as brief as possible so others will have a chance to ask a question. So who would like to go first? Please come to the mic. It's okay, come on. It's right here. Yes?
龙部长你好, I'm a Taiwanese student studying at Georgetown University. I was wondering, as you mentioned, China purchasing AMC, I was wondering regarding recent Wang Zhong bingo and Taiwanese media public, especially the students, have criticized it as China stretching its influence into Taiwanese media in order to brainwash Taiwanese, if you call that. I was wondering your thoughts on how this incident may influence Taiwan and China's relations, and what are your thoughts on the proper reactions of Taiwanese in response to this incident?
Shall we take 3 questions at one time?
Okay, 3 questions. Next question.
Okay. Hi, Minister. I'm Jiaoyang Chen. I am a PhD candidate at Howard University. And one question I have is that despite China's rising power, a lot of people still live in poverty, below $1 a day. So is there a way to redefine and reframe Confucianism to promote authentic development, to improve the living standards for all Chinese citizens? and to make China like Norway or Sweden or Switzerland. Perhaps I believe that by promoting development, by improving China's living standards and stuff, to make it more like Norway or Switzerland. And perhaps this is one of the ways to address the two-state relations. And also one comment I have is that even though, yes, there is, in Taiwan, you see traditional Chinese culture, Confucianism, but I think there's more to Taiwan than just traditional Chinese culture. Taiwanese culture, there's also indigenous, there's Dutch, Spanish, Japanese, and Western. So Taiwanese is unique in that sense, that we're also a global culture.
Okay, thank you. Next question, and then we'll take some answers.
Hello, my name is Yimeng Zhong. I study at GW at Elliott School. I'm majoring in international affairs. My question is pretty much like hers, because when I first visited Taiwan 2 years ago, I feel like people there live in a more Japanese way rather than a Chinese way. So do you agree with the idea that Han just said, Taiwanese culture is the preserver of Chinese culture, or probably is the combination of Japanese culture and Chinese culture and many others? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Over to you.
Okay. What I tried to give today was a very short, sketchy presentation what Taiwanese culture is about. It's not meant to be comprehensive at all. And I was trying to make it clear that I was grossly simplifying Confucianism as well, because just pick one topic, Confucianism, you could probably have 100 conflicting interpretation of what Confucianism is about. And Taiwanese culture, as I said, Confucianism forms only part of it. And there's democracy in there. And when I use the word modernity, I did refer to the Japanese influence in there as well. And Japanese influence plays a very important part in that, whether you like colonialism or you are very critical of it. There's a modernity which came together with the Japanese rule for those 50 years. And not let alone with the influences from the Aboriginals in the Hakka influx and the Portuguese and all those times. So Taiwanese culture is a interesting mix of different origins. However, if you want to say, well, so we Taiwanese are the most unique culture in the world, I wouldn't go that far either, because with mixture of culture, look at Southeast Asia, they are all mixture of cultures. But I think the Taiwanese can enjoy the fact that you have that mixture of culture in there. And referring back to the question, how to help the poor in China, or whether China could develop in the direction of Norway or Switzerland, I think I would leave this question to your next guest, maybe Mr. Longying Tai, who will have time because he will be out of office very soon. I think it would be more proper for him to answer this question. And then the first person who raised the question about the media, I don't think I should enter into domestic issues from Taiwan. Let me put it this way, that I think the Taiwanese have a difficult homework to do. That is, how do you draw the line between getting healthy influences from China and interacting with Chinese on a very open-minded manner, and national security? How do you draw the line between the two? It takes a lot of wisdom. Thank you.
Okay, next question.
Excuse me, I'm Mike Fontaine. I'm the Washington liaison for the Democratic Progressive Party here in Washington. Thank you very much for a fine talk. I agree with you that Confucianism writ large has a very ample and rich history that's very energizing for people who really understand it. Unfortunately, it seems to me, and I'd like to know your comparison, in Taiwan during the martial law period, it seems to me Confucianism was used as a tool of suppression rather than liberation. And I'd like to know, I mean, you know the history better than I. You've written about the whole problem of human rights during that period when for 38 years Taiwan was under martial law, and whatever the nice words were on the plaques, the reality for daily life was pretty tough. And I wonder if you would do a comparison for me with China today, because it seems to me that the Chinese leadership may be trying the same thing, that is using Confucianism to keep everybody in their place as vulgar Confucianism China does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second question.
Dear Dr. Longying Tai, thanks for a wonderful speech. I'm a student from Chinese mainland studying political science here, and I have two questions for you. The first one is that when you are giving lecture here, many Taiwanese people, they are protesting against the merging of Won't and the China Times, the two so-called pro-mainland China media in Taiwan. So what do you think of the merging of these two giant media on the development of civil society in Taiwan? The second question is that early this year, you were questioned in the legislative yuan by Mr. Duan Yikang about the white terror in the martial law period. So what do you think of the historical hatred developed in the martial law period upon today's Taiwan? Thanks.
Okay. Next question.
Hi, Minister Long. I'm a student in Johns Hopkins University now, and I'm from mainland China. And thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting quotes from the mainland China slogans. But as one of the young generation grew up in China, I feel those slogans, those bloody slogans you quoted from mainland China is somewhat distant to me. So I had the same question with the Taiwanese ones, is how typical they can represent nowadays Taiwanese people, like the young people. And is traditional Chinese culture still well preserved in Taiwan? And how are young people thinking about the challenge of modernization and westernization in an era of globalization? And also, as Mr. Richard Bush has put it, Taiwan can be as a democratic model in all Chinese society. And also, as you put it, Taiwan preserved traditional culture quite well. I wonder if these two can be regarded as the soft power of Taiwan, and if we look into the future, how can Taiwan use this soft power towards mainland China? Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Long.
Okay. Confucianism has been used as a philosophy to suppress. Of course, during the martial law and when we were children, we did not really, as a third grader, we did not really read the whole analects. We read selections from the analects. And you can imagine the person who selects the parts from the analects, he did it with a purpose, with an ideology, for the children to believe in part of Confucianism. So the rulers always selectively takes part of a very broad philosophy, emphasize part of it in order to fit his own purpose. And that explains why, exactly as you just said, many Chinese intellectuals in the 90s, when they saw that the communist government was trying to embrace Confucianism again, they were very skeptical and critical, because once you vilified Confucianism for a political purpose, and now are you embracing it again for a political purpose? And we Taiwanese went through the same thing. Fortunately, I would say there comes a time when the people become mature enough, become informed enough that they know how to judge. So that's the only thing we can hope for, is the people have to make judgment on what to decide to judge what the rulers are trying to do. And then this gentleman again mentioned the media merging case in Taiwan. I don't think in this international audience, I want to get into the details of the specific case. I already answered. I think it takes a lot of wisdom from the Taiwanese to really draw the line between getting healthy influence and healthy cultural exchanges with China and the matter of security. And this gentleman mentioned this incident when I was questioned by one legislator not long ago. So it's like this. I was actually questioned on the spot, because the ministry is also in charge of Human Rights Museum, and this legislator asked me to answer the question on the spot, that is, well, he held up my books and said, look at certain pages that you talked about human rights, and now you are in charge of this Human Rights Museum, Mr. Long, then isn't it time that you would put whatever you have written in your books into the museum? Okay, and probably you should also write on the wall that the Chiang Kai-shek is the killer or the murderer. So the conversation went like that. And my answer was, I was a writer who was very, very aware of abuse of power. And now I am a civil servant or a policy maker. If I take this opportunity that I have this policy decision mechanism and power in my hand, so I utilize this moment and I put everything that I have written into this museum. If I do that, I would think then I'm abusing the power. That's not the way to do it. So that was the conversation between us. What should go into the content of a Human Rights Museum to judge history is a matter of public debate, through discussion, widespread debate and discussion, then whatever consensus can go into the museum, but not the content of a book from a writer who happened to turn minister, okay? And then the slogans are all that, is that typical of the youth or the society today? Of course not. Culture is not a fixed painting pinned on the wall. Culture is a flowing river with currents of all different speed and forces, and they interact, they react, and they hit the floor, and they hit stones. There are whirlpools in there. They change every day. Culture is a growing thing. It is not a fixed picture. Of course, people change every day, and the society changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm a student from Hong Kong, currently a PhD candidate at the University of Maryland. I have a question is about, do you think mainland Chinese is really interested in soft power thingy? The reason why I'm saying that is because in Hong Kong currently under the one country, two system, on the one hand, yes, we are enjoying, yeah, there are so many influx of intellectuals from mainland China. However, what I am seeing is that there are so many conflicts on the street between mainland Chinese and Hong Kong native. And from what I see is that they are trying to recolonize us, like changing us from the British colony to Chinese colony. And they are trying to change the education system to try to brainwash our younger generation from Hong Kong that, oh, the Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party is the best or something like that. Like, so I'm really wonder, if mainland Chinese is interested in soft power or just brutally overtaking everything, like they did in like the 70s.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question.
The first day I'm your reader. My name is Zhang Tao. I first read your book Mu Song in the middle school by my Chinese verbal teacher. And in the college, I read your book Da Jiang Da Hai. You will know that it's not published in China, in the mainland of China. I'm lucky in the master. I just see the real person. I'm very lucky. Nice to see you, Mr. Low.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to say I learned something about our traditional culture. Some are exciting in my family tree, just like our family. I have a question about that. Just like us, when my family migrated from Shandong to Heilongjiang province, we lost many traditional culture. How to learn that? And the second question is, if China want to set up a moral criteria system, just like a Western country credit system, if you lose credit, you will lose many things. If China want to set up this kind of criteria system, moral criteria system, how to set it up? From up to bottom, from bottom to up, or from China, from mainland of China, from Taiwan, from power or from money? Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. Next question.
My name is Michael Chen. I'm a student from Stanford. I'm from Taiwan. So pleasure to meet you, Mr. Long. And as a gentleman earlier and yourself mentioned, you were recently grilled by an opposition lawmaker over Chiang Kai-shek's role in White Terror. And I'd like to remind you that Chiang Kai-shek's role in White Terror is not an ideological issue. It's a historical fact. So how is your refusal to answer a factual question different from those who deny or contest Hitler's role in the Holocaust? And now that you're in the US, are you willing to say that yes, Chiang Kai-shek is indeed responsible? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, about Hong Kong, you were saying that you feel as Hong Konger that China is recolonizing Hong Kong and all that. Richard, this is tough on me because if I should have come 2 years ago as a writer, as a free writer. Well, I wouldn't comment on that, but I spent 9 years in Hong Kong, but what I could do is to suggest what the Hong Kongers can do about the situation that the Hong Kongers are in. The students I used to have at Hong Kong U, most of them are concerned with their own private life, their studies, their career, their boyfriends and girlfriends, their family and all that. A very small percentage of students would bother with the larger question like the Hong Kong's relationship with Beijing and all that. I would tell my students at Hong Kong U that, look, political facts are there. And if you want to change that fact, it's very difficult and it probably takes a long time. But I think it's a duty of the upcoming Hong Kong young intellectuals and students to become more aware of the issues involved, to be more concerned about development in China, to create a dialogue with China, try to make an effort to let more Chinese hear what the Hong Kongers think. I think what the Hong Kongers should do. More than that, probably with the time limit and my capacity as a civil servant, I can't really say too much. But I think especially the Hong Kong intellectuals and the young students of Hong Kong can take a more active role and getting into the discourse in China to exchange with the Chinese counterpart, to make your sentiment and your debacles and your sense of frustration known to the Chinese. That's probably very important to do. And the second question about how China should conduct her ethic education, I'm sorry, I'm very happy that you read my works, but I still have to refer back to Richard that you should invite the Minister of Education from China the next time to take questions here. I'm sorry. And then the gentleman expressed his view about Chiang Kai-shek's role. Thank you very much. Our Human Rights Museum is at the moment collecting the oral histories from the victims. So we have a small budget there, and within this budget, we have to decide what is the most urgent thing on the agenda. And the most urgent thing at the moment is to collect from north to south, from east to west of Taiwan, all of the island, to record these oral histories from these victims, because time is running out. So that's what we put all our heart in there at the moment. Okay, thank you.
Next question.
Thank you for speaking here today. I want to ask, in your presentation, you discussed the influence of Confucianism in Taiwan's culture. I wanted to ask, do you believe Taoism has a similar influence, and how would you?
Taoism.
Yeah. How would you compare its influence to that of Confucianism? Thank you.
Thank you for your brief question.
Hi, my name is Zhaijun from George Washington University School of Business. I have ever read one of your book, 请用文明说服我. Please convincing me use the civilization. So in the book, you mentioned that the democracy of Taiwan should established based on the human virtue. So I want to ask for your opinion about the current mainland China's social problem, like the food safety, like the construction accident. So do you think that this problem of mainland China is due to a lack of a good democratic system or a lack of human virtue? So what lesson and experience should mainland China learn from Taiwan in developing its own democracy? Thank you.
The construction? What were you referring to?
Construction like the collapse of the bridge or
Infrastructure, poor quality infrastructure.
Poor.
Hi, Dr. Leung. My name is Alexis Lafort, and I'm currently a graduate student in anthropology at the University of Texas. I was recently in Taipei just early this year in about February, and as a Native American myself, I was particularly interested in how the indigenous Taiwanese people are integrating into the modern society and the intense modernization that your country has been undergoing over the past few decades. And I noticed specifically, I also went to Jiufen and saw that while there were people selling, their crafts there, and then also there was a space, a building for them to sell their things in Taipei itself, it was fairly, unmarked and very difficult to find. And in there, it was not, the presentation of how they themselves are, how are they involving themselves in the formation of the Taiwanese identity nowadays? And because Native American people in this country have been fairly marginalized for the past several centuries now. And I was just curious, what the dialectic was between the indigenous communities there. And also, a second question with speaking about the power of words, I noticed in the legislator hall how you had the boys doing their thing. How are women being incorporated into the government and just running things nowadays? Obviously there's a lot of very well-educated women participating actively, but I was just curious as to how things are for them as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you. I can't give you figures about women in Taiwan. I could only give you a general impression about the Taiwanese women. They are probably, I was thinking they are probably very much well represented probably in all walks of life, and even in political life as well. So in this photo, it just happens that you don't see women in there. There's only one woman in there, but they fight too. They fight too. I have seen pictures where where women would throw the cups at another person or tear the hair. I'm joking. They do that too, but they are also very well represented in the parliament as well, in policy making as well. The indigenous people of Taiwan, they are probably very typically very much marginalized in the news, in the development of the society, despite the fact that the government gives a lot of funding to the Aboriginal work, despite the fact that the NGOs do a lot of work for the indigenous tribes in the east and in the south, they are still very marginalized. And you'll be shocked if you go and look at the age, what do you call that? Not longevity, but the average life expectancy. Yes, the life expectancy of the general Han, the Taiwanese is like in Japan and US and Europe, but the life expectancy of the Aboriginals are very short, something like 67 or even less than 70, and that tells a lot. That tells a lot. Okay, so I think in Taiwan there's a lot of work to be done for the Aboriginals. And about the poor quality of buildings and bridges and public works in China, I'm not going to say, Richard, are you going to invite another minister to come from China? No, I'm not going to say that. Okay.
We'll have the whole cabinet by the time you're done.
But what I would say is, and actually things like this, a bridge will collapse, a school buildings collapse and all that, it reflects a lot what's behind the health of the whole political, social structure. Because you can see that if that happens a lot, it probably indicates that the budget for the construction, the money which is supposed to go in there, didn't go there. Instead, it went into somebody's pocket. It indicates that the pressure, there is no investigative journalism where you have to expose the inner working of this whole process. It shows that the society probably really is lacking in the check and balance system, and that is why these things are allowed to exist. It tells a lot indeed. Then when you ask me to compare Taoism and Confucianism, I give up. For 2,000 years, people have been writing about this, and there are still yet thousands of dissertations and books to be written on this subject, so I can't really answer this question. I could only say when a Chinese literati, Richard mentioned that I followed the Confucius path by accepting the public office twice. So a Chinese literati, it is said when the Chinese literati gets into public office, he or she is a Confucianist. When he or she leaves the office and goes back to his villa or in the countryside, he or she becomes a Taoist. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Long. And my name is Tianqiu Zhou. I'm a GW student from the mainland. And my question is that why you are the first minister of the Education or Cultural Ministry, and can you explain a little bit about the mission of your ministry? And my second question is, do you have any very detailed program between the mainland China and Taiwan to like cultural exchange or student exchange? And on the other hand, from your presentation, it seems like you are quite optimistic about the Confucius Institute. So is there any possibility that the two sides can cooperate to promote Chinese culture in the international space? And thank you.
Thanks. Next question.
Hi, Professor Long. My name is Yingtai Qing. I'm an undergraduate student in George Washington University, major in international affairs. I used to study in Beijing for 2 years, and I was very into writing very much. And so I'm very interested in your experience. I want to know that how can you relate your writing experience to your political career as Minister of Culture? Like, will you make any change in values or in beliefs, something like that? Because I have ever written a 500,000 Chinese character novel for my friends. So I'm very interested in this question. Thank you.
Thanks. Next question.
Thank you. Hello, Ms. Long. My name is Zhang Zhiru. I'm a law school student in George Washington University, and I'm from China. And first, I have to say I'm a big fan of yours. And actually, after reading your Big River, Dajiang Dahai, I started to interview my grandpa about the history. And and secondly, I'm a little curious about your choice, because for years the Chinese-speaking world was deeply influenced, deeply moved by your beautiful words in your books. However, last year you decided to take an office in Ma Ying-jeou's government. So I'm curious about that. Do you think that politics has a greater influence than literature on culture? In consideration of the cultural revolution in China, I believe that politics should put, the government should put its hands off the culture issue. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Okay, good. Question number one, as a writer and as a politician, which one has more influence? I think a writer has more influence. A good writer has more influence. But to deal with, if you want to have something done in a shorter time span, then be a politician. Not a I don't know if I'm a politician, but as a policymaker. They are different, these are two different fields, and both, okay, let me put it this way, both can be influential if you are good at them. So the primary criteria is whether you are good or not. It doesn't lie in whether you are a writer or a politician, because there's no influence when you are a bad writer. There are a lot of bad writers in this world. And if you are a crooked politician, I don't know if you can even influence at all. So this is a personal choice. Just do a good job, and then it probably doesn't matter where you are. But of course, as a civil servant now, my income is only 1/4 of what I used to do as a writer. And my working hours are 4 times longer than when I was a writer. And as I said in New York, as a writer, I used to criticize others. And now I'm criticized from all sides by others, and I can't even talk back. And so, so the Chinese compare this kind of work, doing a service for your community, compared to doing work in a cloister. I mean, for your next life, collecting credit for your next life. You suffer a lot. Okay, can I change values? The lady asked me about writing, and can I change values? No, I cannot. And that refers back to what the ministry is doing, or whether cultural policy is needed. It depends on what you mean by cultural policy. If in your understanding, cultural policy is that I am telling you what to do, then that kind of cultural policies we better do without. Okay, but if by cultural policy we mean that you have concerted effort, putting efforts and putting resources together, and you build up the platform for artists to come up stage, and they can perform nicely, and more people will see them. If by cultural policy you are talking about building up an infrastructure for arts and thoughts and creativity to thrive, then we need cultural policy. Okay, so it really depends on what you mean by that. So the Culture Ministry of Taiwan, what it is doing, it is, to put it in a nutshell, it is trying to provide, to build up this infrastructure, this platform, so that our writers, our movie directors, and our painters, our thinkers have a better environment to function. So, thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Cynthia Schneider, Georgetown University, and as you know, I am not a specialist in this area, so I promise not to ask you about the media merger. But I wanted to ask you a more general question which relates to your last answer, and that is, how do you see your position as cultural minister as a way to kind of introduce Taiwan or make Taiwan better known to the world through its culture for non-specialists such as myself, and how do you see doing that, and does your approach to that differ for the way you would interact with mainland China and the way you would interact with the rest of the world? And just one follow-up question, for China, for all of its emphasis on soft power, there are then these double standards, such as, for example, when China imprisons its most famous artist, Ai Weiwei, that it undercuts its message of cultural, community. Are there problems, challenges like that for Taiwan, or is that a difference? Thinking of your Human Rights Museum, for example, which is very striking. Thank you.
I'm not sure about the second one.
Well, I'm talking about the double standard that many see in China, that they say on the one hand they are promoting culture through the Confucius Institutes and other outlets, but then at the same time they imprison their own most famous artist who built the most famous building that everyone knows.
So you're saying if there's a double standard in Taiwan?
Yeah. Does that exist in Taiwan?
Okay.
Because I think that's a problem for China's soft power. Do you have the same kind of problem or not? And how do you see using culture to introduce Taiwan and make Taiwan better known?
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. My name is Amy Xie. I'm a PhD student here at George Washington University. Minister Long, thank you for coming here to give this talk. My question is about Confucius Institutes and Taiwan Academies, which you mentioned at the beginning of your speech. Everyone is very curious about the difference, and you briefly answered that you don't think that that Taiwan and China need to compete in this regard. However, would you agree that in order for a country to successfully exert its soft power internationally, it has to nevertheless be able to create a unique message, image, and unique relationships around the world, be it Confucius Institutes, Taiwan Academies, British Council, or even the USIS. So as a policymaker, could you talk a bit more about what you foresee as the strategies and programming of Taiwan academies and centers around the world? Thank you.
Thanks. John Zhang.
Thank you. John Zhang with CTI TV. Welcome, Minister Long. It's very interesting that you have referred several questions to your counterparts on the Chinese mainland. But listening to you, it was a wonderful speech, but listening to you, you sounded not only as a minister from Taiwan, but also, to my mind, a minister on the mainland as well, your counterpart, especially when you explained that Confucius Institutes probably are not so bad. You compared them to USIA. You also said that you compared Taiwan to a motorboat and China as a carrier. And China is rediscovering Confucius values, and Taiwan and others may need to be patient while waiting for the carrier to turn around. But the United States is a bigger carrier. So when the Chinese carrier meets the US carrier, what do you expect the two to interact with each other? Because Taiwan's relationship with both the Chinese mainland and the United States are essential, are critical. Thank you very much.
Please.
The two carriers. Well, with these two carriers, I think it's of the interest of all of us that these two should not collide. Absolutely not. What you're describing is we are witnessing, after the Cold War, we are seeing the forming of the new order of the world. And I don't think we are very clear yet what this new order is going to look like in even 10 years from now with this globalization thing. It takes probably wisdom from both sides, from the US side and from the China side, to steer the course. And I think in my talk, I used the word empathy. I would think not only empathy is needed between Taiwan and China, I think empathy is definitely needed between the Americans and the Chinese as well. Because I think in our minds, what I'm referring to is the Berlin Wall has fallen. It's all more than 20 years, but the walls in our minds, they do not fall so easily. And after half a century of the Cold War, there are, of course, wars in our heads, and that's what the Americans and the Chinese, they both have to work on in order that these two carriers do not collide. And I don't know, when you said I sound like the minister from Taiwan and Minister of China, I don't quite know what you mean by that, but when you say that, when I go back to Taiwan, I'm in deep trouble. What I would imagine what you mean is I try to stress the importance, empathy, that we cannot treat China, just demonize China as the threat and as a threat alone. We need to, I think you need, even if you take the other side as enemy, you have to really understand the enemy in order to deal with it. So in my talk, no, I'm not acting as the minister from China. I don't think it's possible for China to have a minister like this. Then with the Taiwan Academy, thank you very much for your interest in the Taiwan Academy. It was actually only established about less than 2 years ago, and there was no Ministry of Culture at that time. We did not have a Ministry of Culture until 3 months ago. So this is a brand new ministry. So, and what our ministry is trying to do is to try to reformulate what the Taiwan Academy should be doing. We try to reorganize the operation mode of it, and the budget for next year has just been decided something like last week. So we probably we need a little bit of time to work on what the content of the Taiwan Academy should be, because it can work only with the budget. And what we're trying to do is we have three offices in the US, in New York City, in Houston, and in Los Angeles. And these three offices will work like probably like the literary house in these three places. Literary houses meaning bringing artists from Taiwan, linking up the Taiwanese theaters and artist groups and writers groups with the locals for international exchanges. And with areas outside of these 3 points, we're trying to have, we will have a program, cooperation programs. We'll sign agreements so that, for example, with George Washington University, if it is interested and it becomes our liaison points with Taiwan Academy, then we probably, I could imagine that we could have Taiwan film festivals here, or could have Taiwan literary seminars here done as well. So I'll be looking forward to that. Cindy asked, does that kind of a double standard exist in Taiwan? Cynthia, I think that kind of double standard probably exists in any country, in any politics. It's only a matter of degree. What I meant is, this gentleman from Taiwan just referred to Chiang Kai-shek's, comparing Chiang Kai-shek to Hitler, this kind of thing. What happened in Taiwan is it's not like Taiwan does not have any political prisoner anymore. So you don't have the double standard, like you're talking about your soft power, and then you jail your own artist. We don't do that. But what Taiwan has is whoever takes office, whoever is elected into office, with the ruling party, they would select the part of injustice which has been done before. They would try to make peace with it, or to compensate with it, but selectively. They would tend to select the part which would bring them immediate political profit. And then this is the part they would do. The part of history which does not turn into votes, then you put in the shelf. And that applies to both parties. So that's kind of a double standard too, but it is not to be put on the same level as the double standard you talked about in China. Okay? And how do we make Taiwan more seen in the world? I have to say this, because of the unfortunate political situation, the Taiwanese have gone through 38 years of martial law, which is an absolute isolation from the world. And then after that, and overlappingly, then we are going through, at the moment now, we are going through more than 40 years of international isolation, which is really doing a great injustice to the people of Taiwan. And that's all the more that we have to try harder than others in making friends with the global communities. So, and that explains also why just a simple lecture like this today to us is very important, because, you know, when I spent 9 years in Hong Kong, and you can see that Hong Kong is a cosmopolitan place, it's a very international place, and there's a reason to it. You have chief of state, you have major politicians from the world who will visit the city, and as a child, then you could read the newspaper and you get to know these names. You get to learn about international affairs because it happens in the circle of life, in your daily life. And the Taiwanese kids are deprived of their chance because no head of states would come, or your own head of states cannot go to those places. And therefore you don't even read that in the news. And then not only on the political level, at the moment, whenever we have international symposiums, international symposium of writers, international conferences of, say, dentists, as long as you have the word international, then you are boycotted from Beijing. And the result, the Taiwanese are really deprived of their global citizenship, which is so unfair to the children, the generations of children who are growing up in Taiwan without any choice, deprived of the right to participate in international social life or cultural life. And that is something that we really have to work hard on. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you. With no small regret, I think that I must fulfill my responsibility to bring our session to a close on time. But I think you will agree with me that the last 90 minutes have been very special. And all of us are very fortunate to have had this encounter, this engagement. Please join me in thanking Minister Long.